Oh, that is beautiful. Look at that background. It's like Pacific Northwest style, whatever that means to you. All right. Trust it. So Alibaba Cloud has come out with a newly updated version of Qwen3-235B-822B-instruct. This version touted 2507 to denote the year and the month in which this updated variant of this model has come out, is supposedly very, very impressive if we are to base that on these benchmark JPEGs right here. Now, truthfully, this model I want to test in the most powerful way that I can actually go about testing this, which means that unfortunately I'm not going to load up some heavy quant on the Beefcake PC behind me, but I am instead just going to be using this through the actual chat.qwen.ai interface, as they do have the model listed right here in the drop-down where you can select it, which you may be used to seeing if you use ChatGPT or something like that. But I find that considering this is showing to be very competitive with things like Kimi K2, as well as DeepSeek V3-0324, I want to test this in a way that it will perform at its best, so we can actually take a look and see if these charts are reflective of the real-world performance. Now, in terms of technical improvements to this model, I've noticed that the blog, GitHub, or documentation don't seem to have been updated to reflect this new variant of the model. So being that that is the case, we will just quickly take a look at some of the highlighted improvements here in this model card on Hugging Face. First and foremost, we have our highlight section right here, and I do want to go through some of these, but I think the most interesting to a lot of us is going to be what we see right down here in the model overview, where the context length is natively 262,144. If I open up the model card for the previous variant of this model, we can see that it had a native context length of 32,768. So this is a very, very significant improvement in context length. It is kind of somewhat difficult, I suppose, to test how well it handles context length at that large amount. Maybe perhaps we'll put in like part of the Great Gatsby or something and see how well it does, but that is a very, very big increase and something that will be of interest to a lot of folks. Beyond that, something else that I think is kind of related in terms of QOL improvements is that this model only supports non-thinking, and it does not generate the think blocks in its output. A lot of the Qwen3 models had the kind of toggleable thinking capabilities by specifying this flag where you could enable thinking equals true or false. It is not required for this model, so this is not a thinking model and will not show us any chain of thought, which personally I've kind of grown to like that when I just get the answer instantly. The only other things of note here shown in the highlight section are significant improvements in general capabilities, and they mention basically everything you would use a model for is listed right here, so we can just call that significant improvements. Substantial gains in long-tail knowledge coverage across multiple languages. My best guess of what specifically this means is it's just better at like translation tasks or understanding many different languages. I know in the original Qwen blog post here, they do mention a lot about these models being able to do a ton of different languages. If we scroll down here, there was some section right here where so it has a lot of known languages and dialects, 119 to be specific, which is quite impressive. So perhaps it got better at kind of understanding a lot of these different dialects. Aside from that, we can scroll back up right here and see that it has better alignment with user preference in subjective and open-ended tasks, meaning it enables more helpful responses in higher quality text generation, and of course the updated context length. So if we scroll down here, the only other thing I want to make note of in terms of technical interests here is that it seems to perform much better than the previous iteration of this model, except in one specific coding benchmark right here, which is the Aider Polyglot, where we see that the previous variant actually seems to perform slightly better. So that is a little interesting, and I will say it's cool to see the model being accurately judged where it performs worse than a previous iteration, as opposed to just trying to like quote unquote benchmax it. So that's good to see. For our first task, we are just going to have this generate a browser-based operating system using HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. So we will go ahead, and as we can see right here, this is using the newly updated variant of this model. And being that that is the case, it is not spending any time thinking. It is just going ahead and immediately beginning to generate the code right here. Now, I did test this most recently with Qwen K2, and I will say the result that I got with Qwen K2 was likely the best result that I have seen in any model that I've tested this with, including closed source state-of-the-art models like Gemini 2.5 Pro and ChatGPT o3. So around 930 lines of code later, we have our completed script right here. Seemingly, this has some different applications in it. A simple iframe-based web browser, based off of some of what I'm seeing right here, this does seem like it will perhaps be quite impressive, assuming, of course, that it does function correctly. All right, let's take a peek at our web OS. Okay, well, the biggest problem I notice, obviously, which I would assume you would also have noticed by now, is the lack of like a background aside from just this very bright white, which definitely docks some style points here. I will say first and foremost, the icons here are correctly used. Okay, it used an abacus like icon for the calculator, which Qwen K2 did as well. I find that kind of funny. I like that. I don't see a system clock down here on the bottom right, which I do see in a lot of the generated results for these, like this specific test. So let's just go ahead and click on the start menu and see what we get. Okay, so we have log out, and then we have our web browser, calculator, and notepad. So basically the icons that we have right here, we also have in the start menu. I will start simple with the notepad application. Okay, very pretty. The minimize, full screen, and close bars are quite aesthetically pleasing, I would say. And it does have some pretty like blue color tile menu bar. Oh. Okay, it doesn't. All right, it's not letting me... Okay, let's try minimize. Okay, so it did minimize that to the taskbar, which is good quality of life. Full screen works as well. However, unfortunately, we are not actually able to type into our notepad. So for now, let's just try the calculator to check functionality. Oh, no. Okay, so it doesn't seem like, it almost seems like some like styling elements here did not properly work. I'm basically just going to report on this. I want to see what happens though if we click log out. I am going to give this thing, yes, I want to log out. Oh, logged out success. Okay, I want to give this a chance to go ahead and fix this result. So we've just told it what was wrong and basically said that the blank white canvas upset the user. It is now tasked with fixing these issues and generating the complete updated code. As sometimes, depending on the model, they like to get lazy and tell you just replace this snippet. But when you're doing everything through SSH and then you have to do it in Nano, it's a pain in the... All right, let's check out our second iteration of the web. Oh, that is beautiful. Look at that background. It's like Pacific Northwest style. Whatever that means to you. All right, so first and foremost, previously, aside from the background image not appearing, which has definitely been fixed, the actual apps didn't do anything aside from open. All right, so far it seems like, hey, very cool. That does work. And let's just ensure that the full screen does work, as well as the minimize functionality, which just puts it back in the menu bar. Very good. All right, let's check out our abacus calculator. Oh no. So the numbers are there. It's just, oh, something I didn't check is whether or not we can just kind of change the size of these windows by dragging them. So we can't, but we can change the size by full screening them. So acceptable. So these numbers are actually there. It's just that they're white font on gray button. So that's kind of, all right, let's just do a 7 times 7. Yes, that is correct. Divided by 7, which should be 7. Very good. All right, let's do, I can't even really see. Okay, 246 times 8, which is, of course, 1,968. So, all right, this does seem to work properly. Now, interestingly, and something that I've not seen before in this testing, it put a web browser here, which I'm very interested to see. Okay, so we have our example domain. This is for illustrative examples in documents. You can use this domain in literature without prior coordination or asking for permission. It does work. I just had to type www. Awesome, this can be a self-promotion test. So the website has loaded quite poorly in this small browser window, but I have gone to bijanbowen.com where you can book a consultation to have me integrate AI into your business. I'm decent at coding, so, hit me up and we can talk. All right, let's, so the web browser does actually work. All right, let's just check our, ability. Okay, so we can have multiple apps open at the same time and they can be minimized in the menu bar here. The system does work correctly to put the currently in view window over the others that are not currently in view, which is pretty much all we can ask for with such a beautiful background image like this. All right, let's just see if I can open a bunch of them at the same time. I can't. So that is quite good. All right, this is a very acceptable result. I'm quite pleased with this. The only thing I'm going to knock it on is that it does not actually have a clock here anywhere on this page. As a final thing, let's just log out. I am sure I want to log out. Logged out successfully. All right. And then it just all right. Very good. So next up is a bit of a more complicated test, again, kind of in the coding section, where we're asking it to make a low poly 3D racing game. It should feature a first-person view of a person driving a car, a simple map to drive around a competitor car, and then the ability to actually pause and restart the game. The style is 3D low poly. So let's go ahead and see what it does right here. Now, Qwen3 did a very impressive job in this in terms of the actual graphical elements that were formed there. It wasn't so functionally the best, but you could kind of drive around and things like that. So I'm interested to see what this does, especially on the first try. As with Qwen3, I had to prompt it again to fix some of the issues it had, and it still didn't quite fix it, but it was a very impressive result. So let's just go ahead and see how this ends up. Of course, once again, we will use Google Chrome. So, all right, yes, that's fine. Oh, we can ignore that. All right, start game. All right, so, ooh. All right, so the menu doesn't actually go away, and the view is, so look at our opponent there. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to say that. So this is, all right. Obviously, there's an issue. Well, there's a couple issues, but up here in the top left, we do actually have our speed in kilometers. It does seem that, so interesting, our max speed in reverse is lower than our max speed in forward, which is something that is just good attention to detail, as that is the case with a real life car. We have a position as well as a clock. I've gone ahead and just given it some of the issues that we had and said basically fix it and generate the entire script. All right, let's check out our race game. Okay, so we have instructions down here. We have a more aggressive... Oh no. Unfortunately, the second result was significantly worse than the first result. All right, so let's just go ahead and perhaps let's do some context length testing with this, considering that that was vastly improved over the previous version. I am now going to paste in the entirety of the Great Gatsby book, which is nice to see that it just pastes it in this way instead of just like pasting every single word of it here in the chat window, which I like to see because then it's really easy to actually ask questions about it without having to face a huge wall of text right here. So before we do this, I would like to say spoiler alert, but with that, you've had a little over 100 years to read the book by now, so I don't feel too bad spoiling any part of it. Okay, I spelled says wrong, but the model should likely understand what I meant. I'm just asking it for a one-paragraph summary of what this text says. It's a collection of excerpts from The Great Gatsby, presented out of narrative order. Let's ask it something vague. Okay, so who was driving Gatsby's car when the bad thing happened? Daisy. That is correct. Very good. Okay, so that is correct here. So it is, obviously it's of course possible that this model has like knowledge of the Great Gatsby and things like that, but it is just cool that that establishes the car hit Myrtle. That is correct. And I did not actually specifically tell it what the bad thing was. So this is also good to see. So now let's just go ahead and have it write like a very small book report on something like that's really an abstract thing to be related to the Great Gatsby. So we've now asked it to go ahead and write a 5-paragraph book report on how this novel can be related to the current offerings of the consumer GPU market. The comparisons must be done at a PhD level. Obviously, these are two things. Is it writing 5 paragraphs of saying no right here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it said no, but its no answer wasn't 5 paragraphs, and then it kind of did it, but it kind of didn't. So first and foremost, something I want to say is it's actually nice to see models call you out and be like, what the hell are you talking about? This makes no sense. Like, there's no information about GPUs or anything like that. This is clearly a fragmented collection of excerpts from the novel The Great Gatsby. Any attempt to draw scholarly PhD level comparison between this and the, would be fundamentally disconnected from the source material. All right. So now I've just kind of summed it up by saying it's for a poetry PhD assignment where the point is to relate seemingly unrelated topics, a test of creativity. Oh, good. All right. I'm not going to read this all on camera. I should. But I want to just kind of like, all right, let me read this first. Gatsby molds himself into a persona capable of reuniting with Daisy, just as NVIDIA molds tensor cores to simulate consciousness in AI avatars. This was really extremely, extremely good. I don't know how to relay this. Truthfully, I'm just going to copy this and paste it somewhere so anyone who's actually interested in seeing what this thing came up with can go ahead and do that. Obviously, if you have some pertinent knowledge about The Great Gatsby, it would be very beneficial in reading this. But I will say some of the things that were written in here were like, oh my God, like it mentioned here something like, it was like dark. The Valley of the Ashes, the desolate industrial interzone between West Egg and New York, prefigures the hidden infrastructures of modern computing. The semiconductor fabs in Arizona, Taiwan, and Dresden, where silicon wafers are forged under conditions of ecological strain and labor exploitation. Fitzgerald's fantastic farm where ashes grow like wheat resonates with the material substrate of GPUs, rare earth metals, energy-intensive fabrication, and planned obsolescence that render yesterday's RTX card as obsolete as Gatsby's war-era wealth in the face of old money's entrenched power. All right, I'm just asking it to name a computer company being analogous to each main character. Okay, so Jay Gatsby is NVIDIA. All right, Tom Buchanan is IBM. Gold. Daisy Buchanan is Apple. What about Nick Carraway? It's going to say Nick Carraway's AMD. I'll bet, like, this Asus ROG phone, it says, is this dead? I gotta charge this. Sorry, it says Nick Carraway is AMD. Okay, I think the final test I'm gonna do after becoming concerned with how like into that whole book report thing I got is a web-based digital audio workstation where the user can make electronic music. Oh, no, you don't. No, I don't want a simplified version. We've had to modify the prompt. There we go. It was trying to be like, hey, this is kind of really difficult, but here's what I can give you. So I just prompted it additionally with no excuses, just code in all caps. And this thing will understand caps because they are tokenized differently, meaning that they are represented differently as their non-capitalized letter cousin. So perhaps they hold more weight to the model. Don't take any of that at like scientific value, by the way. So let's just go ahead and see what this comes up with. All right, so it came up with this, which if you're familiar at all with like music stuff, this is visually actually quite impressive. The problem was it didn't really work very well. So if I press play right here, I do have a speaker hooked up. Yeah, so it didn't necessarily work very well. Impressive though, like from a graphical standpoint and all of the features it added here and things like that. And you could definitely work with this to get it functional. But I realized that I kind of over prompted it here, and I have just subsequently gone and asked it to please instead go ahead and just make like a drum sequencer. Even though that result was beautiful, I think we need to simplify it. Can you just make it a drum sequencer? So hopefully we'll have something that is nice to listen to. All right, let's try the drum result instead. Okay, good. This is a lot simpler and probably what I should have initially asked it to do. It does look fairly aesthetically pleasing. So let's just go ahead and kind of program this, if you will. You know, I probably should have checked to see if it worked before I started doing all this, but that's okay. I'm going to just go out on a limb and trust it. Oh, yeah. This works. It's good. I am the issue here, not the software. So this is, this is actually quite all right. Now, I would like it to do one more thing here that I think will just make this a little bit more fun to actually go ahead and play with. As a final thing, we are just asking it to go ahead and add a keyboard-controlled keyboard, the instrument. So you basically just type on the keys here to actually play a piano key or something like that, so the user can play along or jam along with the drum track. Something interesting here that it actually did do, so right now, one thing I want to make note that the keys are not properly mapped to the actual keys that they're playing here. So that makes it a little hard to actually play this using the keyboard. However, check this out. If we actually change the sine wave pattern of the oscillator here, we can see that the different waves produce different sounds. So here's a square wave. That is quite cool. Let's go ahead and try the sawtooth, which I'm not a big fan of personally, but I find it rather, like, so the only big issue that I notice right here is the actual kick does not work in the sequencer anymore, but the snare does. So, all right, well, truthfully, I kind of like got too into playing with the drum thing, so I don't really know what the previous clip would have been me doing, but I will say that that is probably going to wrap this video up on the 2507 variant of Qwen3 235B-A22B-Instruct. This is a very interesting and impressive model. I will say the thing out of all these tests that I did that probably most impressed me was the very obscure Great Gatsby book report where it needed to draw comparisons and like a link between the Great Gatsby and the current consumer GPU market. It really picked out some very, very interesting metaphors and things of that sort. I was very impressed with its capability there. Of course, the long context update here is going to be something that a lot of folks are going to be interested in, just as well as kind of the no thinking now, where it's nice to just be able to ask it a question and immediately start to see the result get generated, as opposed to it using up a lot of time and tokens thinking through the problem. Of course, we don't know how that will have affected its benchmarking here comparatively to how this would have been if a thinking version also does come out, which perhaps will. I don't know anything at all, so that is just a blind guess, but it is something perhaps to think about. Get it? No. So that's going to wrap up this video. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments, and thanks for watching.